Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to those of you on the West Coast. And welcome to our webinar today on the remote culture shift, how to maintain a high-performing culture with a remote workforce. My name is Charles Summers. It is my pleasure to be serving as your moderator today. My goal is to make today's webinar as interactive as possible. So we've gone ahead and added a few fun polls to the discussion today. Also, if you have any questions at any time during today's presentation, please use the GoToWebinar questions queue. When it makes sense, we'll jump in to the questions as we go. We also will have a 15-minute dedicated Q&A session at the end. We'll also have a survey pop up as you leave the webinar today. We'd love to get your feedback. If you want to reach out to me for any Humantelligence webinar, webinar-related questions, future webinar topics, feel free to reach out to me directly at charles.summers@humantelligence.com, or you can chat me on LinkedIn as well. As the COVID-19 pandemic continues, there's no doubt that this is a challenging time for our companies and cultures therein. More than anything, I hope that you and your loved ones are safe and well. As always, Humantelligence is here to help you drive high-performing culture through our three-step process of measure, manage, and hire, and that includes remote cultures as well. So we'll get into that quite a bit today and talk a little bit about our tool and what we're doing to help out. But we're stepping up as an organization, helping both clients and non-clients with their remote work situations. We've rapidly developed some new tools that we're making available to everyone today, which most of you here today have actually taken us up on already. But if you haven't already, go to remoteworkscorecard.com. You can create a free personal or team account up to 10 people. You can take the 12-minute self-assessment measuring behaviors, motivators, ideal work environment, and get a remote work scorecard that gives you an overall score, 0 to 100. It'll provide strengths, find opportunities for improvement. It'll give some tailored feedback to help you perform better in your remote environment. So this version of Humantelligence will always be available to you going forward. But if you'd like full access to our full culture analytics module, or you have more than 10 people that you'd like to map the remote culture of, you can always sign up for a free 90-day trial. We do have that available up to 100 people. So if you'd like to talk to, if you'd like that, let us know. Reach out to us. I'll provide a link here once I'm done talking as well. And as the COVID-19 situation begins to slow down, hiring ramps back up. We'll be here to help you find people who thrive in your culture. There's a lot of great talent out there right now, and we can definitely help bring the best talent to your organization. I'm going to kind of kick things off here with 3 polls back to back to back, 20 seconds apiece. We're going to kind of do a rapid fire thing, and I'll launch these polls. We'll get some answers in about 20 seconds. I'll show the results, and then at the end, after the webinar is over, I'll send out the webinar answers to everybody in the audience today. All right, so I'm going to pull up the first poll here. So everybody should see that on their screen right now. And the question is, has your company shifted to a remote work culture in 2020? So give it 10 more seconds here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll now. Quickly share the results. All right, so as expected, about 95% of you said yes, that you have shifted to a remote work culture. We'll talk about that a little bit more today. We have some stats from our last webinar that we did that we'll share, but it's definitely, that percentage has raised over the last couple of weeks since our last webinar. All right, so I'm going to go on to the next poll here. All right, so you should see that now. Do you know which people, leaders, or teams may have a harder time with remote work than others? So are you able to identify the people, leaders, or teams that are having potentially having some problems working remote? All right, we'll give it about 10 more seconds. All right, I'm going to close it, and I'm going to share the results here. All right, so 67% of you said yes, and 33 said no. All right, I'm going to move on quickly to the next poll. All right, so you should see that now. Do you know how naturally suited you are to work remote? All right, 10 more seconds. Right. I'm going to share the results here, and then we'll move on from the polls. So 63% of you said no. We'll talk about how to actually do that, how you can find those things today using a couple of our tools. So I'm going to go ahead and hide the results and go back to our slides. All right, so I'm just going to quickly walk through today's agenda before I move on to introducing our presenters for today. But we're gonna kick things off. We're gonna talk a little bit about some of those tools that we recently launched to help talk about Humantelligence just a little bit, and then we'll move into priorities in your remote work environment. Then we'll move into the psychology of remote work. We'll get into the nitty-gritty of that. And then we'll actually talk about that remote work scorecard specifically. And our co-founder Carrie will walk us through what the actual product looks like, the thing that you can use today to measure your psychometrics and see, some strengths and weaknesses and things that can help you do a little bit better. So, all right. So, and then at the end, again, we'll have a 15-minute Q&A session. So, but at this time, I'd like to introduce you to Humantelligence CEO, Juan Betancourt, and also our co-founder, Carrie Leidick. Right now, I'm going to hand things off to Juan. Juan, go ahead and take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today. I'm the CEO of Humantelligence. My name is Juan Betancourt. Charles, you're still going to run the slides, right?
Yes.
So I kind of wanted to cut to the chase on what you're going to learn about today and what we're defining as the piece around remote work that we can help with. Remote work encompasses a lot of pieces. So let me kind of share with you kind of what's out there and where we're going to focus today. So go ahead. So first, everybody knows 5-6 weeks ago, COVID hit. Everybody thought, oh no, we got to go work from home. You had to find a physical space. Check. Once that's completed, what's the next in terms of working remote? Charles? Technology. You need to set up a video connection, collaboration tools like Slack, Microsoft Teams, others. There's lots of different tools out there, Google. And so once you've got that set up, right, there's a third thing that you need to be able to work remote. Your routine. We've all kind of gone through this pattern of kind of like the shock and awe of working remote, getting that space, getting technology set up, and then realizing that's not enough. You also need a certain routine. You kind of you got to find your rhythm into a work-life integration that's new and different. But once you find that rhythm, you're now set to start working remote. And the last piece that you need is kind of what Humantelligence focuses on. So once you've checked physical technology in your routine, now you have to look at your own psychology or the psychology of individuals of the team, as well as the team culture. This is the piece that Humantelligence has been working with for the last 8 years. And so that's what we're going to focus on, and how to help you and your teams focus on this area, because this is what leads to better performance, productivity, and maintaining what you had while you were all at a physical structure, now while you're working remote. What you'll learn is that some of your best individual contributors, some of your best leaders in a work remote environment are no longer your best leaders or your best individual contributors. And conversely, some of the people that didn't work great in the office and some of the leaders who weren't great are now going to become your best leaders and best contributors. You need tools and you need to understand that. And this is what we're going to talk about today. Next slide. And by the way, before I go into my background and who is this guy who's talking, you should know that Humantelligence, we have 20 employees and we have been working remote for 8 years. So we basically have people in New York, Chicago, LA, San Francisco, North Carolina, Miami, Dallas office, and a couple of people in Dallas, and then 10 people or 9 people in Bogota and Cali, Colombia. So we've been setting up the 1, 2, and 3s logistics of working remote for about 8 years. Not all those 20 were on the team back then, but now we've also built products around the psychology and the culture of it. My background, I was blessed with parents who focused on education, so I was lucky to go to some good schools. My best school ever, though, was Procter & Gamble, for those of you who know the Procter & Gamble management, and you know, go-to-market understanding. My claim to fame is I turned Puma around. They were bankrupt, and I was hired to relaunch it worldwide out of Germany. Siebel Systems, you know, went from 100 employees to 12,000 employees in a year. It's a pretty well-known success story. I was lucky to be part of it. And then I worked in Europe and Latin America for Decathlon, for the world's largest sports company. It's about 5 times bigger than Nike. And then I became a headhunter and worked in the world of recruiting for executives at the 2 largest firms, Heidrick, Korn Ferry, and then started my own search firm before taking over Humantelligence about 5 years ago. Thanks, Charles. Next. Now, my company and what we're achieving and the insights we have and the leadership we have and the innovation around culture and understanding it for large organizations down to small organizations and with such powerful insights isn't from me. This is a team effort, not only my 20 employees at Humantelligence, but my board. From the beginning, we've had people like the former CHRO of Northrop Grumman, a top 20 company in the world, the former CFO of Korn Ferry, and another startup guy, all on the board, kind of coaching and advising our organization on how to do things. In terms of advisors, we also have the former CEO of McDonald's, 17-year CEO at Renzi behind the company, helping us with high turnover roles at companies who are in restaurant. We have the former CEO of Korn Ferry Leadership and Talent Consulting Division, Anna Dutra, the CIO of Burger King, who's a great technologist, also in a high turnover restaurant environment. And then for job matching, we had the insights of the former president of Monster.com. Next. So what do we do? Humantelligence helps organizations measure, manage, and hire for culture. So the whole remote culture scorecard is not something new for us. 4 years ago, when call centers are going from a centralized call center in one building to save money and have all these men and women who are call center agents move to working remote from their homes, we were the first company advising and consulting with our software on how best to do that, because the top performing call center agents at the central office ended up becoming the worst when they went home, and vice versa. So some of the benefits of our platform, we help align culture to strategy at every level, like the call center example I gave you. We help give accurate and comprehensive 12-minute assessment, which is one of the most advanced but quickest assessments out there. We give talent insights and team culture analytics to leaders and to organizations to understand why there's performance, and with that you can improve individual, team, and company performance. And then lastly, we have a proven ROI in hiring for culture fit or culture of performance. So whether you want to clone what works or complement what you have, we can ensure lower turnover, save time and costs in hiring, and get rid of all those useless phone screens and interviews that are very subjective, and go straight to hiring who's right for the role. Next. We have lots of companies and partners who leverage our platform to save money, have an ROI in recruiting, and to align culture to strategy and have high performing teams and groups. I won't go through all of them, but there's many Fortune 500 down to small companies. Now let's define kind of what culture is, right? bottom right corner, you see that this is from Deloitte, PwC, the Katzenbach Center there, and Deloitte's Burson Group. All the major consulting firms have the same definition. It's basically the way things get done. We call that the W of our BMW work styles, okay? Not just for one person, but the aggregate whole, but also the behaviors, okay? The behaviors of your employees over time, and the values, what we call motivators. We have this framework called BMW, behaviors, motivators, which is values here, and W for work styles. And then taking that not only for an individual, but rolling it up with technology now and having a light AI system present insights as to what works and what doesn't work for different business models, functions, and territories based on what is best for that company, that division, or that function. And when you put all that together and you can align your business strategy to your organizational culture, and not through surveys and engagement surveys, which are not your culture, right? An engagement survey does not pick up on behaviors, values, or how things get done. Engagement surveys are people's perspective, subjective bias on whether they're happy or not. That is not what PwC or Deloitte or what we measure as culture. Engagement surveys are something else, but in terms of aligning culture to strategy, this is what we've actually achieved in measuring. Next.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and launch this other poll here. We'll spend about 30 seconds on it as well. 1 second here while I launch it. All right, you should all see the poll on your screen right now. We'll give it about 30 seconds here. All right, given COVID-19, did you realize how your culture could shift so radically moving to a remote work culture? That's the question. All right, about 15 more seconds. Let me go ahead and close the poll here. All right, Juan, are you able to see the results right now on your screen? You want to walk
Yes,
through
I
that
am.
quickly?
Yeah, I mean, it looks like it's split 50-50. Obviously, a lot of people have culture, on the company, coffee mugs, on their T-shirts. It's on the wall of the building. And a lot of people think, hey, we have this booklet. When people join the company, they memorize it, the 4 values of the company, and they set it and forget it. Nothing in the last 100 years has ever educated the world of business more to culture being something that lives and breathes and changes on a yearly basis as COVID-19. We woke up, and half of you are realizing this from the results, in January to a certain culture, a way of doing things as a company, okay, going to an office, working, seeing people, to all of a sudden 90% of us, I think the 95% of this group, and by the way, there's 285 people, so all these poll questions, you're looking at your peers, mostly HR related people, 285, 95% of you are now remote, and that was unexpected. And that is not just a logistical thing, that is a shift in your culture. And so I think HR now realizes that culture is not this sleepy thing that you put on T-shirts, coffee mugs, and do an engagement survey every couple months. This is something much more powerful and will impact companies. Next. So let's break down culture, right? What is culture not, right? It's not your vision or mission. Those are important. Culture supports that as well as the objectives. It's not your employee benefits and perks, right? Apple and Microsoft, very different cultures, okay? Could have the same, free education for your children, free lunches on Friday, work from home on Tuesday. All of that doesn't mean that Apple and Microsoft have the same product services or the same culture to support that. Engagement surveys, I'll use the same example. Apple and Microsoft could both take whatever engagement survey your companies currently use, whether it's Perceptyx, Glint, SuccessFactors has one now, and you could end up with Apple and Microsoft both with 30% super job. I just go and I get my job done, I'm gone. It's neither here nor there. It's like average. And 30% saying, I hate my job, I hate my boss, I hate this company. Can someone tell me that why or how that tells you that Apple and Microsoft have the same culture. You could never find someone at Apple or Microsoft that would say they have the same culture. Yet with engagement surveys, you could end up with the exact identical scores on engagement surveys. An engagement survey is not your culture. Don't fall into that trap that's explaining if you have the right people in the right jobs and the right groups to achieve your goals as a company. And then leadership. Leadership does not trickle down, okay, from the CEO to everyone. Okay, the Uber CEO was fired. The 24,000 people under that CEO, who was a horrible guy, did not see a change in the culture around the world, right? Maybe the direct reports did. So leadership trickles down in your team, but we should all be so lucky if culture was as simple as the leader saying, "This is what we are, and this is who I am. Therefore, the company's this way." And every one of you has aspirational cultures. It's good to define it, but you also need a tool to measure it and to see if what you think it is actually what it is. Next. So to summarize, and then we'll get into the remote scorecard soon. Culture is your people, their psychology, and the work environment they create. And it's reinforced at the team level and every organizational level you go up. Specifically, what we measure to support that culture is a framework that we, endearingly call the BMW framework. It's a little cheesy, but it's very easy to remember. We measure behaviors, whether someone's more stability oriented or change oriented, or a team or the company. We measure motivators, whether the individual, team, group, division, or company is more service or innovative driven. And we measure work environment. Okay, what gives an individual energy, or a team or a company? Is it a systematic environment or a creative environment? You could have two people with the same disc, or two people with the same Hogan, or two people with the same strength finders. One could be miserable and one could be happy if you don't understand the work environment. And those other tools don't measure this complete picture. Our tool does this in 12 minutes. Nobody in the world can do it in less than an hour. And our tool is about 1/10 the price of any tool out there. Next. So the COVID-19 crisis and the culture, I would call it problem or challenge. 84%, and on this call, 95% of companies are facing this unexpected culture shift to a remote work environment. Not everyone's ready. And psychology, remember the fourth point to working remote, not just technology, collaboration tools, finding a physical room and your work-life balance, but the psychology is key to understanding how to do this. So with that, let's enter into the new remote work scorecard feature and product, and whether or not you and your team is ready. And I think I have took down the survey question. Do you know if you are suited or naturally born psychologically for remote work? Okay, 65% of you, 2 in 3 of you, I'm glad to see, realize that you don't know, because there has not been a tool like this to align insights about you with what an ideal work remote profile would be. So with that, let me introduce our expert resident and co-founder of Humantelligence, Kerry Leidick. He has an industrial organizational background in his studies, his master's, and is a co-founder of Humantelligence and works with major client integration success, was doing that for Hay Consulting for many years, and now we've been fortunate to have him do that with our largest clients. Kerry, take it away.
Juan, Charles, first off, it's great to be with you. It's been way too long. We're on Zoom every day, all day, collaborating, working across different geographies, different teams, different functions with different clients everywhere. We've been doing it for the last, 8 years, as Juan mentioned, and we've learned a lot in the process. We've taken a lot of what we've learned personally and what's worked in our organization that has been fully distributed from the beginning, and built it into our remote work scorecard feature that we're making available for free out there to both our current clients and new clients that would like to join us and get the value from it. And we really hope you do. I also just wanted to say thanks for everyone to joining. We know there's lots of competing priorities, especially now. Your time is valuable, and we're going to get right into it. First, let me go back to a little bit of the science, and I'm going to introduce myself in a slightly different way. I'm going to use my Humantelligence talent profile that you see on the screen. After taking a 12-minute, short, quick, fun self-assessment, I immediately see these personas that pop up. And what these are my top two motivators and my number one behavioral style. And what I am is a maverick and a creative. And behaviorally, I'm an architect. Now, those completely resonate for me. I kind of march to the beat of my own drummer. You know, I'm very freedom oriented. I love creating new solutions and bringing them to market. I love working with clients to tailor what we're doing and making it work in their organizations. And that's where the architect comes in. So I feel like I have a great fit, you know, in the work that I do with my colleagues at Humantelligence and with our partners and our clients. So let me, I'm going to grab the presentation. Charles, I guess you can, okay, perfect.
Just give it to you.
Yeah, I got it. So you can let me know when you see Juan's profile. Did that work, Charles?
Yes, yep,
okay,
I see it.
Now, remember I mentioned that I am a maverick and a creative and an architect, and you see Juan's profile, he's a maverick and an architect, which we share. We have alignment there, and he's more of a helper. You know, he focuses a lot on enabling performance and removing barriers for the people on his team, you know, which we feel every day. And so he's focused a lot on that, while I'm focusing more on the creative elements, on product development and, you know, creating unique solutions for our clients. And those two personas, if you will, you know, work hand in hand, and we're really good collaborators in that way, where we have a lot of alignment in some areas, and we're different in some areas, which makes for, you know, a really great collaboration between us over the years. Let me mention, before we dive into the remote work scorecard and unpacking all of this, I want to describe a little bit about how we approach the science of Humantelligence. So first off, it really starts with a foundation of everyone coming into their company portal and developing a higher sense of self-awareness, you know, building that awareness of what your styles are, what your motivators are, what your ideal work characteristics are, uncovering what your life priorities are, and making sure that you're reinforcing that in the decisions that you're making every day. It's very important for everybody to build that self-awareness, because it basically points to all of our own subjective biases, and being armed with that allows us to then move on to the next part in our what we call our engagement hierarchy, which is how to build awareness of others, especially when it comes to the interaction effects between my tendencies and the tendencies of other people that I'm trying to communicate with and collaborate with effectively in order to build effective working relationships. And then lastly, we move up to the aggregated team culture. We take the same science of the BMW framework, the behaviors, the motivators, and the work environment or work energizers for people. We aggregate that, and you can see the data at an aggregated team level, which describes the behavioral style of the team overall. What are the dominant tendencies of that team, which is a great way to uncover how that team shows up in the rest of the organization, and how other teams in the organization experience that team. The motivators, which are based on personal values that are hidden until they're uncovered, either through a painful trial and error process, or through the science that you're going to see in a minute. And then the ideal work energizers that describe, you know, where your team tends to focus their discretionary effort, you know, when given the choice, which is really important to understand about how people will direct their energy when they're working on things that, you know, aren't right, you know, due today. So let's take a look at the remote scorecard, and we're going to dig into that science a little bit more. And what we did was we looked at key characteristics. There are 14 different measures or scales on the Humantelligence assessment, 4 for work behaviors, and for the assessment nerds out there, the behaviors are based on the DISC model, the DISC model, and there are 4 DISC. Well, we have a little different spin on it, but there's the work behaviors. We have 6 work motivators, which are based on a personal values framework that covers a variety of personal values that are shared across the globe among cultures. They're kind of human-based social values based on research out of Harvard back in the 60s and 70s and through the 80s. And ideal work characteristics, which are also based on the DISC behavioral framework. We looked at the characteristics of each of those 4 what we call lenses, and we identified characteristics that would be more suitable to the remote worker. The underlying principle behind that, was looking at for people who are don't have as high of a need for affiliation on a day-to-day basis. In other words, they don't necessarily get all of their energy from working face-to-face. As well as people who feel more comfortable establishing their own processes and procedures and not have to rely so much on process and procedures that are more prevalent, in the office-based work environment, when you're seeing your boss every day. There are a few other nuances to how that profile has been developed, which is all built right in. All of the explanation and description is built into the My Remote scorecard. When you get in there, you can take a look. But as we go down, you can see that the first thing you see is a fit score between Juan and the target profile, which is a 71. When you complete the assessment and you see your scorecard, you receive a score from 0 to 100, which is giving you an indication of how naturally suitable you are to remote work. If you score over a 70, you have a high suitability score. If you score under 40, there can be some issues there that especially team leaders need to pay particular attention to. I'm going to show you how you can actually get to it here. When we walk through the profile for Juan, you can see that we see Juan's profile scores for behaviors. He tends to be stability oriented, dominated by deliberate in his decision-making approach and steady in his pace of work. And then we see the stability orientation, reflective and cautious, as 2 key elements of the target profile. Now Juan is scoring as what we call flexible in the middle of that target profile. On the reflective versus outgoing and cautious versus freeform. So it's not being flagged as either a strength or as a potential issue or weakness, what we call a major difference. Now below the behavioral profile, you can see the behavior insights, tips and recommendations, along with the opportunities and strengths that are highlighted here. And these tips and recommendations are specific to Juan's particular behavioral profile, and it's giving him some very practical insights into what he can do to adjust to that remote work reality. The work behaviors based on personal values, you can see that Juan is helping. We saw that in his helper persona. This is a flag. People who are high helping tend to like to be ready, willing, and able face-to-face with people who need help. They prefer a team-based environment. It's not super high for Juan, but it is a dominant characteristic. But he has a strong alignment to the freedom motivator, with his own #1 motivator being freedom, and the ideal profile being freedom as well. He's also aligned on the uniqueness motivator, which has to do with that individualism and creativity that people thrive on. Again, more motivator insights, tips and recommendations, opportunities and strengths, and then ideal work characteristics. Great alignment here with new solutions and working with facts as the 2 dominant characteristics. Little bit of difference on structure versus flexibility, but again, Juan scores in that middle range, so really not an issue, and then ideal work insights that are provided down below. When you get this get this remote work scorecard for yourself, you can take this away in a PDF report, grab it, use it, refer to it, and it's right there for the taking. Let me go into now, I'm going to shift over to teams, and I want to get right into the team data. We've got a number of teams that, this is actually the Humantelligence company data that I'm showing you. We're very transparent about that. We've got the overall Humantelligence team with 18 people. We have a product team, a marketing team, and a sales team. I'm going to look at the overall Humantelligence team. And the first thing I actually want to show you before I get into the aggregated team culture is that concept I described early on. We move from building self-awareness to building awareness of others and identifying those interaction effects. Now that Juan and I both have a deep level of self-awareness around our own subjective biases and tendencies, as a team leader, and you can see here I'm actually logged in as Juan here as the team leader of the Humantelligence team, and you see my panel right next to him. What Juan can do is go into these actions and do a compare with me. This is probably the most popular feature in our system, is that it gives you a comparison score on a 0 to 100 scale, same principle as the comparison between the individual and the remote worker profile. This is just a profile to profile comparison that points out where Juan and I can build on those unique differences and alignments, to optimize our communication and collaboration. I won't get into all the details here, but it gives us some very specific things, very strong alignments on our values and motivators, some difference in our problem-solving approach, which is a lot of where our collaboration is built on, and our effectiveness in our collaboration. And then at the bottom, getting the tips for communicating with each one of us. Let me go back from here, and I'm going to go right over to team culture, and we now are moving up into that highest level of the engagement model, and we're looking at the aggregation of all of the data for the 18 people on the Humantelligence team, following the same framework, the behaviors, motivators, and ideal work, and you can see that across these tabs. The work behaviors, we've got the stability-oriented people indicated here on the left side of the chart, and the change-oriented people here on the right side of the chart. You'll notice something about this pattern. It's very diverse and it's very balanced. It's something that we have worked really hard at achieving, and Juan, I think, will speak to this a little bit about his own insights as we come back to this. The work motivators are less diverse. You see that it's primarily a freedom. Here you can see the freedom and knowledge-driven team. We're very entrepreneurial, people who like to work remote and work in a distributed team that moves fast and is highly entrepreneurial. That's well suited to the Humantelligence team. We're also very knowledge-driven, meaning we use science for all of our product development. We use science in our engineering, in our product development, and the solutions that we bring to the market, to our clients. Ideal work, you'll see a balance between a systematic versus a creative environment. Mostly creative. We are in the business of developing new solutions, so it's dominated by the new solutions ideal work environment. Balance between working with facts and working with people, and variety tends to be correlated with that freedom driver that we saw earlier in the motivators. You can even see our life priorities out of 22 different life priorities that you can pick from. You pick 3, rank them 1 to 3, and you can see from our team culture that we're very much driven by achievement. About almost half of the people on the team, and personal development. We like to build relationships and friendships. We're also high integrity, and we like to take responsibility. So those are some just different insights into the culture of the team. I want to go back to the work behaviors and ask Juan, if there's anything you wanted to add to, what you've learned over the years with the Humantelligence team.
Yeah, so here at Humantelligence, we drink our own Kool-Aid, right? So one of the challenges for me as CEO of a company going from 5 to 20 people about 2 years ago was once we figured out the right product, the right strategy, the right positioning, we had to scale. And so this is the current team that you're looking at. And here in behaviors, you'll see that we're really well balanced between some change-oriented folks, so that's their dominant traits, or their energetic vector, if you will, of how they show up in their behaviors, and some that are stability-oriented. Now, you should know that 2.5 years ago, we did not have any cautious. The bottom left there, Carrie, if you could highlight cautious so they see what I'm talking about. Yeah, we had 0 cautious people. We had, I think, only 1 reflective person, only 2 deliberate, and 1 steady. So 90% of the team was only change oriented. This was a challenge. And so without knowing it, most startup CEOs, they don't realize that by year 2 or 3, you actually need to change your culture, not keep what you have, because you won't ever grow and do the next phase, which we needed a stability-oriented growth. Similarly, on the ideal work section, or lens, as we call it, we had a great culture 3 years ago of being all to the right on creative. Everybody was about new solutions, about variety, doing things differently, flexibility. We had 0 structure. We had only 1 working with facts and 0 proven methods. So over the last 2 years, I've used this tool to align the strategy of scaling, right, and putting in a systematic, scalable company that could support hundreds of clients. And I did that through leveraging a tool like this. Similarly, if your strategy now means a remote work culture, you can now use a tool like this to see where your gaps are in being a good remote work team or company, and then hire and or train people to align better with that. Lastly, on the more actions button, I always joke with Carrie, I don't need him anymore as my industrial psychologist, because now a platform like this makes all of you, whether you're in HR and marketing and sales, everyone becomes a world-class industrial psychologist, because you can see for the 3 layers, BMW, your strengths and behaviors, okay, and then your keep in mind section there, Carrie's highlighting what you should do, your weaknesses, your blind spots. Same with motivators, your strengths, again, keep in mind section, exactly there on behaviors. Similarly on motivators, the strengths, in this case being freedom and knowledge-based team, and your keep in mind blind spot, all the way through to work styles. And then you can get these specific things for working remote now that we've kind of tailored a feature for working remote. Thanks, Carrie.
Perfect, Juan, thanks. Let me move on quickly to the remote scorecard for the team leader. So let's take the My Remote Scorecard information and compile it for the team leader to have fingertip access to it and be able to quickly see what's going on with the different members of the team. So we see down below, first, we see an aggregate of the current team culture compared to the target profile, and we see a gap. This is very similar. It's a 0 to 100 score on similarity between the 2 team cultures. And then down below, you see the list of the team members sorted by from low to high, the score from Dan at 31 all the way up to 80 for Teresa on the fit to the remote work profile. And Juan, why don't you comment about how you use these insights with some of your team members?
Carrie, can you hear me? I think my connection might be a little weak.
Yes, can hear you now.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so a way that I, as the leader of this team, or in this case, my company, use this is, I look at Dan, who, he's our head of sales and sales ops when he joined, and he'd always worked at large companies like Goldman Sachs, very structured person. And so in his behaviors, if you notice, he's extreme outgoing there on the left, whereas a remote worker typically is less outgoing. They don't need that personal connection. So if you look down under behavior insights, opportunities on reflective versus outgoing, the opportunity shows that without interaction with his colleagues, he may feel isolated. And so I had to work with him, and this tool will help your employees realize that under tips and recommendations, to get that personal interaction, instead of just waiting for the project or the deliverable to drive when you see on Zoom video or on a phone call, you should actually just pre-schedule a weekly time on your calendar to meet with all those other people that you should just walk into their offices and see over lunch, because someone like Dan needs that kind of connection in terms of his behaviors. Let's go then maybe also carry it down to motivators. You know, Dan is extreme order. Order is one of the two extreme things that motivate him. And so an opportunity for order is that, you know, a challenge for him is that this sudden change in the process and procedures, which working from home, there's not, it's going to challenge him as he adjusts his routine and develops new ways of working. So as his leader, I need to give him a little bandwidth, because he might not get up to speed as quickly as somebody else who is maybe more used to working in a freedom environment like Carrie, for instance. And so with Dan, the tool, and myself, I use this to coach Dan, to try to recreate that routine for him and divide the day up into chunks. So he still takes a shower at 7 a.m., you know, still gets ready, goes to a desk, puts on a tie, has a lunch at a certain hour that he's used to, you know, in his Goldman Sachs environment where they all had lunch at the same time, etc. And then lastly, on the work styles, you can use an insight, for example, where he's extreme working with people. Well, when you're that extreme working with people, you prefer to be with people, and obviously being at home, the people are your family, which is probably the wrong people to be with when you're trying to work. And so that's going to be a challenge for him. And so that deprivation of social interaction may lower his energy. And so knowing this as a leader will help me kind of get him back on track and maybe spend more time with him and more calls with him than maybe somebody else like Carrie, who doesn't need that interaction, and maybe even set Dan up with other people and have him, you know, set up scheduled calls with other people on the team, because he needs more touch points. Thanks, Carrie. That's a great highlight of how we use this with our own team and with Dan specifically.
Yeah, and guys, I actually have an audience question I feel like fits in perfect right here, if you don't mind. I'll throw that in here. And I've had a little time to think about it. So when I'm reading off the question, I can give my short response while you guys are kind of thinking about your answer. But the question was, do you have some general tips around how to avoid too many meetings for the purpose of staying connected? I want to be connected, but I also don't want to waste my team's time. So the first thing that pops into my head, if you have taken that free assessment to get your scorecard, we have a plugin. So if you go to the Google Chrome store, you can get a plugin that will help give tips for communicating, staying connected, things like that. So go to Google Chrome. That would be my short answer, but I'll kick it over to both of you guys to see which one of you has.
I'll give a quick one. That's a kind of person by person preference, and some people will need those kind of connections, others won't. Sounds like you won't as a questioner. Charles is going to show you on our remoteworkscorecard.com website. We actually went through, and everybody on my team spent about 10 hours each over 2 to 3 weeks. We kind of collected the best of the best articles and resources that address questions like that from people's own experience. And so if you go to the website, and Charles will show you at the end of this, there's a lot of great articles that have anecdotes and examples of what's too much, what's not, and how to deal with things like that.
Perfect. Yeah, and I think just to reiterate what Juan said, you know, it is really about the individual and tailoring your approach to the individual and meeting their needs. I know that people are feeling these days, you know, over-zoomed, if I could use that term. You know, all the recommendations that you're hearing about remaining connected and, you know, having birthday parties over Zoom and meeting with your friends and, you know, getting on Zoom for entertainment from even Saturday Night Live last weekend had a funny Zoom sketch. If you haven't seen that, it's hilarious. So it can be it's a major adjustment for people who are used to interacting in the office environment to go to a video where you have to, you know, make sure your hair is right and you're in the frame and, you know, you're dressed up. I hope I get credit for wearing this jacket today, Juan. Not gonna put a tie on like you said, that was funny. But anyway, it really is about understanding what people need, and you can do a lot of it in a one-to-many kind of environment. So have people join a team Zoom, you know, when that's appropriate versus doing lots and lots of one-on-one Zooms with people. So you have to find that balance, and that really falls into those priorities we talked about early on, which is around the right technology and the right routine. Figure that out for yourself and work with your team to, collect, what should we keep doing? What should we stop doing? What should we continue doing? That's a great framework for how to have a conversation to make communication more effective for everybody, and everybody get their needs met around FaceTime, face-to-face time with their boss and with their colleagues. And video conferencing can be exhausting. So sometimes just a quick phone call will do the job. So just consider that. Anyway,
hey, Carrie, just we only have 4 minutes for this last demo before we get into opening up questions. There's 4 minutes left for the demo.
Yeah, let's wrap it up. So I want to hand it right back over to Charles to do the wrap up, and we'll go from there.
All right, guys, give me 1 second here and I'll take back controls.
Something I did want to mention, before we go into the remote work scorecard piece that Charles is going to speak to, is that what you're describing, what that question was really about, was how does a team leader need to make an adjustment in a new remote work culture? And we have collected some data on that and found that there are certain approaches and different ways of working that are specific to team leaders in order to make that adjustment. There's a slide that's going to come up here in a second when Charles.
Yeah, are you able to see that, Carrie? I have the slides showing right now.
Yeah, I see it, Carrie.
Okay. Oh, I was in the wrong window. Sorry about that. Okay. First off, I'm going to punch through these real quick. Establish a new job mindset. That means realize that you're in an entirely different culture. Give yourself a break. Give your team members a break. We all need to just have a little bit more flexibility, a little bit more, say please, say thank you. Sometimes you won't get invited to the meeting. It wasn't personal. It's just people are trying to figure this new culture out, okay? That new job mindset can give you a lot of relief, psychologically. Empathy as a team leader, job number one. Empathy, using the Humantelligence science, is actually a way to build that empathy. So putting yourself in the other person's shoes, understand how they tick, and speak to them from that perspective rather than your own subjective bias. That's one technique to use, but empathy is job one. Increase your one-on-ones 3x, okay? Now, that doesn't apply to everybody in every situation, but missing that informal communication, that water cooler talk with your boss and your direct reports, requires you to get into a different routine with one-on-ones rather than doing, for example, a one-on-one every 2 weeks, every week. You might need to bring that up into shorter conversations 3 times a week to make the adjustment. Start using agile methods. This is something I'd really recommend everybody look into as a team leader. 5-minute stand-ups at 8 a.m. every day that last 5 to 10 minutes. Scrums and sprint reviews, and there's a lot of language and there's tools around that help everybody stay on track, and it's particularly helpful in a distributed team environment. Then finally, recognize the longer term trends. This remote work culture thing is not going away. So we have organizations that are looking for ways to continue to keep the budget down, especially by saving office space, and they're looking for work that can be done on a continual basis working remote. Actually, just a quick note, an anecdote, a close friend of mine is a psychologist, and her work, she works face-to-face with clients, and now because of the remote work environment, she's been doing Zoom sessions with her clients. Well, her employer has figured out that those are actually a lot less expensive because they don't need to give her an office, and they're actually looking at moving to at least a 2-day-a-week work from home, deliver your sessions through Zoom rather than in the office, and having people to starting to share office space rather than everyone having their own office. CFOs are really paying attention. So as a team leader, a team member, and as an HR professional particularly, identify those longer term trends in your organization, get aligned to them, and embrace that new culture reality that we all will be dealing with on a longer term basis. There are going to be permanent shifts. So finally, I'll just hand it back to Charles to wrap up.
Yeah, so okay. Yeah, so just quickly how it works, benefits. You'll take the 12-minute assessment to discover how suitable you are to work from home. You'll get a score 0 to 100. You'll get that scorecard report with personalized recommendations. You'll get detailed feedback, just like if you go and take our free assessment at any time. You'll get that detailed feedback on behaviors, motivators, and ideal work environment, what we call BMW, which Juan talked about a little bit earlier. And you can do it for individuals. You can do it for a team up to 10. If you want a bigger team, we can open up our platform to do that as well. Just reach out to us. You can reach out to me directly at charles.summers@humantelligence.com if you have a bigger team. And then moving on here, existing Humantelligence clients, it's already active in your profile or in your account, so you should see it right in your account. For new clients or non-clients, go to remoteworkscorecard.com. I'm just going to pull up my screen here very quickly. All right, so this is what the website looks like. I think everybody can see that. So just remoteworkscorecard.com, you just enter your email address to get started. There's some information about a lot of the same information we talked about today, some screenshots, things like that. Juan mentioned a lot of different resources and articles that we came up with as a team. There's hundreds of articles in here. So if you need any kind of resource, look through these. There's definitely quite a few different pieces of content in here that you can take a look at. Additionally, let me move on to the next step here. We do have a couple of minutes we'll stay on a few minutes over and answer some of the questions that have come in, but if you have a question, go ahead and ask that now. The first question I'm gonna get to here, I'm gonna circle back real quick to the daily stand-up, because I have a handful of questions that have come in about the daily stand-up. And Carrie, Juan, feel free to jump in here, but the daily stand-up is something that I personally use. I think it's a great thing, a great tool to use team by team. I have a former mentor of mine, basically had me read the book, The One Thing, and every day for 5 minutes with my team, we do a daily stand-up. On that stand-up, you say your one overall thing for the day, the thing that you're really going to accomplish for the day. Now you probably have a list of 100 things you've got to do at any given point, but pick your one thing, tell your team all gets on the same page. It's a quick interaction, 5 minutes. You only get one thing, go around the room, and everybody says their one thing. So that's my recommendation for that. Carrie, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Well, I would just say that, our engineering team does the exact same thing, and they do it remotely. Every day, daily stand-up. It's completely agile and Scrum, methodologies. We use a number of tools with the technology development team, using Pivotal Tracker for tracking projects, and product development using Slack for daily communications. Take a look at some of those tools. The daily stand-up is an agile methodology, and so you can go dig into that and what that looks like. I love the daily stand-up concept because it helps people establish that routine that we know is important for people to put into their day.
Perfect. All right, so moving into the next question. And this is a question for Carrie or Juan. You guys can probably both answer this, but does everyone necessarily see everyone else's results in the remote work scorecard if you create a team?
No, the remote work scorecard is personal to you. Only the team leader sees everybody's remote work scorecard.
Perfect. All right, so then another question I have here, and for everybody that's that needs to jump off, I understand we're at the top of the hour. For everybody that needs to jump off, this is recorded, so I will send this out within the next 24 hours. So if you want to speed through it later on and get to the Q&A session, feel free. I understand you might need to jump off, but I'll go ahead and move on to the next question here. Can I create my own remote, or yeah, hang on, let me back up. Can I create my own target remote profile based on my own company? Sorry.
Yes. So we have a couple different ways of doing it. There's what we call a target team culture that you can apply. We didn't get into what we call culture mapping at the team level, but the answer is absolutely yes. And we'd love to talk to you about how to do that.
Do you have a way, sorry, moving on to the next one here. Do you have a way to scale the scorecard for an entire company of 1,000 people?
Quite easily. Just last week, we started rolling it out to a company with 2,000 employees, basically overnight. So we have our client success team has a way of getting that communicated, getting that configured in a company branded portal, and getting that rolled out very quickly.
Actually, I want to jump in there as well, Charles, on that question. You know, the free scorecard.com website, we kind of, I think, cap it at 20 people for you to put in your team members and put every email. That gets laborious at 50, 100, 1,000. So if you have, or from a company with thousands of employees and want to get this for free during this quarter that we're supporting all these COVID impacted companies on working remote, let's say you have a 10,000 person company, we can create a link that has a special account like Carrie described, a portal for your company where you send one link in one email to 10,000 people, everybody takes it, and by the end of the week, you can have a scorecard for the entire company and kind of compare it division by division, where the CEO, head of HR can go to the CEO and say, hey, our sales team, they've been doing this a lot. Look, they actually are 70 compared to remote work. They should be fine. Here are the pockets where we need to work on. HR, oh my gosh, it's a 30, right? They're used to structure, they're used to being at the office. And then, you know, marketing is kind of in the middle, right? That kind of high level looking down at the organization for these remote work insights, we can do that in a scalable way, which is as simple as pushing the button on an email to your entire organization. So just contact Charles or Carrie or myself if you have our info to do that if you have that big of an organization you want to do this with.
Thanks, Juan. All right, so I'm on the last question now. If anybody has any additional questions, feel free to add those. We can stay on and answer those. How useful do you rate Microsoft Teams and other collaboration tools to this to master this situation? I think, Juan, maybe this is a good one for you. I know you had a slide on it earlier, a little bit about collaboration tools.
Yeah, I mean, I'll let Carrie answer this one. I mean, at a high level, you know, there's a lot of tools out there. They all have their benefits and their drawbacks. It's really specific to kind of back to culture and the way your organization works, right? Some people find the Microsoft tools is too structured for them and their environment of a creative work environment. Some find it puts the structure they need. So I think it really depends on what aligns with the culture of your organization. You know, Carrie's been running a lot of the operations of our company and using these tools. So I'll let Carrie kind of answer that as well.
To me, the primary consideration for Microsoft Teams has to do with security. if your organization is, requires a level of security that kind of goes beyond the average company, the average small company, that uses, let's say, Google Apps or Slack, my preference is actually Slack as the go-to collaboration tool. It actually has built-in video and built-in calling for one-on-one, for basically real time. You can just dial somebody up, do a quick, it's like a FaceTime experience inside Slack, but you have all the benefits of document sharing and discussion strings and all the rest of it. That's my preference. I find Microsoft Teams, I have used it. It's a little bit clunky, but if you're a Microsoft shop and you've got Microsoft 365 and it's all built into your infrastructure, Teams is the way to go, especially if security is a concern.
Perfect. All right, that brings us to the end of our presentation. So Juan, Carrie, I appreciate your time. For everybody that joined us, we had well over 300 people who joined us today, so I'm super excited. We actually had one company who had 50 people show up, so that's always exciting. So I'm glad that you could spend the last hour of your day with us.
That's amazing. Thank you.
Yeah. Let us know how we did by taking the survey that'll pop up once you leave today's webinar. And as always, we're here to help. So we've mentioned a few times there's quite a few things that we're doing to help with your unique remote work situation. Pretty much everybody on this call is going through something like that. So if you need something, just reach out. We've got a lot of different things, a lot of different resources that we can definitely lead you to or help you with. So again, one last time, thank you, everybody. We'll see you on our next webinar. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your week.